Welcome to CS303. Today we will start a new chapter, and the title of this chapter is Virtual Memory. So this chapter and the last chapter, they essentially deal with memory management, right? So if we think back what we learned in the previous chapter. There we discussed various memory management strategies used in computer systems, right? Those were contiguous memory allocation. Then we talked about paging. Then we talked about segmentation, and then some combination of those. So different ways in which we can manage the memory resource, right? All of those strategies that we discussed, they had the same goal to keep many processes in memory simultaneously to allow multi-programming, right? So because we want to allow multi-programming, our memory management becomes a little bit more complex. Now we have to keep many processes in memory, right? So then where do we when processes need memory, how do we assign memory to them? What is our algorithm? How do we divide memory into certain parts and so on? So we talked about all that. Okay. However, the assumption in the last chapter was that an entire process should be in memory before it can execute. So what we're doing is we take a process, bring the whole process into memory, and then if you're using a page table, we populate the whole page table for that. And then one by one we do a mapping of virtual to physical address, right? Now here we'll sort of relax the assumption that the whole process has to be brought into memory before it can execute. Okay. So virtual memory, we say virtual memory is a technique that allows the execution of processes that are not completely in memory. So which means rather than bringing the whole process, we bring a part of the process. Okay. And then execute that. So one major advantage of this scheme is that programs can be larger than physical memory. So generally we see that if we add the memory requirements of all the programs we have on our desktop or laptop or even mobile phone, we'll see that these sum of memory footprints of all those programs is much greater than the amount of RAM we have, right? So even if we bring a couple of large processes into memory, in their totality, we may quickly run out of RAM, and that will have an effect on how much multi-programming we have. So if there was a way in which we only bring in parts of processes, then naturally we can support many much larger number of processes for your multi-programming. So that's what we're going to look at. Okay. So in this chapter, we are going to provide a detailed discussion of virtual memory, examine how virtual memory is implemented, and explore its various complexity and benefits. Okay. 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 Now I am on slide number 2, and here we talk about the various topics in this chapter. So we will first of all, as usual, we will start with an introduction or a background to virtual memory. Okay. So that's the first one, background or introduction to virtual memory. Then we will talk about demand paging. So a specific kind of paging technique which is used in virtual memory. So we'll talk about that. And third topic is page replacement. Okay. So here what happens is we may have an access to a page for which the mapping does not exist in physical memory. So note that the way this memory management works with paging is that for each page we allocate a physical frame. Correct? And then we map it to the page table, and then whenever there's and access to that virtual address, we look up the page table, and from that we get the actual we generate the physical address. So sometimes it may happen that the page we need to access, the mapping for that is not there in the page table, which essentially means the page is not in memory. So we have to get that page from disk. So this is called page replacement. We'll talk about that. Fourth topic is allocation of frames. So one thing we did not talk about in the last chapter was the allocation of pages to frames. So we assumed that the allocation has already been done in the previous chapter. So allocation of pages to frames means that the page table entries have already been populated. So but when we want to allocate frames to pages, there are certain considerations, and we have to use some techniques. So there are algorithms which look at allocation of pages to frames. Right. So for example, if I have 10 pages but I have only 3 frames, so out of those 10 pages, which 3 do I allocate to frames, right? So this becomes a question, and we discuss various algorithms. Next we will talk about thrashing. So here what happens is the number of pages that the process needs to execute at a relatively good progress, relatively fast, they are not in main memory. So we have to do a lot of page replacements, and eventually the performance really degrades. So this is called thrashing, where most of the time the operating system is bringing the page from the disk. So a lot of disk I/O, which eventually hurts the response times. So we'll discuss thrashing, and what we can do to counter it. Allocation of kernel memory, right? So just like so right now, whatever memory allocations we discuss, we're generally talking about user processes, but kernel memory also needs to be allocated. So we'll spend some time talking about kernel memory allocation. Other considerations in virtual memory, so some other miscellaneous topics within virtual memory we will cover. And finally, operating system examples, so how real operating systems perform virtual memory. Okay, so these are the set of topics. Okay, so now I am on slide 3. So as we know, each of the chapters that we discuss has some objectives, right? So what are the objectives of this particular chapter? First objective, to describe what virtual memory is and what are the benefits of virtual memory. Okay. Second, illustrate how pages are loaded into physical memory using demand paging. Okay, so we'll talk about demand paging. Third objective is apply various page replacement algorithms. So there are a bunch of page replacement algorithms. The optimal one, least recently used, first in first out, and for least recently used there are many variations which we will talk about. Okay. So we discuss various page replacement algorithms. So which means that all the frames that you are available for a process, they are already allocated. So note that the definitely all the time the number of physical frames will be much less than the number of virtual pages. So therefore you have to be very careful in allocating, and naturally each process can receive some quota of page frames, right? Because we don't want one process to hog the frames of all the other processes. So now for a particular process, when all the frames have already been allocated, and now you have a request for another page for which a mapping is not existing in the physical memory, no entry in the page table for that process. So you have to do a page replacement. You have to evict a page from the physical memory. So you have to remove that mapping in the page table, and then you have to bring another page in. So the question is, which page do you evict? So page being in physical memory means that there's a physical address which has been mapped to that particular page. Okay, so that page corresponds to a virtual address, right? And for that particular virtual address, a physical address has been mapped. So page being mapped to frame means virtual address being mapped to physical address. So that mapping has to be removed. Void has to be created in the page table, and then the new page has to be brought into that entry, right? So that's page replacement, which we'll talk about. Describe the working set of a process and explain how it is related to program locality. So working set means that it's a set of all pages that the process needs in order to make decent progress. So we'll see how we can get this working set. And generally, if we have the working set of a process, set of all the pages that it needs to make decent progress, if that working set is in physical memory, performance will be good. Otherwise, we have thrashing, right? Otherwise, we have thrashing. Discuss how and finally discuss how Linux, Windows, and Solaris manage their virtual memory. Okay, so these are the different objectives. So essentially, you can see we're talking about virtual memory, and then within that, we're talking about demand paging. A side effect of demand paging is we have to do page replacement, right? And then we talk about some other aspects like thrashing, working set, program locality, and finally how various operating systems perform virtual memory. Okay, so these are the objectives of this particular chapter. Okay, now I am on slide number 4. Okay, so slide 4, title background. So in the previous chapter we discussed how the OS manages memory, right? And memory management has one goal, and that is to keep many processes in memory so as to allow multi-programming. So we already know that, right? In order to implement multi-programming, many processes need to be kept in memory. So naturally the scheduling comes into play, and the memory management also will come into play. Right? Memory management will become more complex, right? And we also know processes need to be brought into main memory or physical memory before they can be executed. Yeah, so we already know that we have two major kinds of memory: physical memory and virtual memory. Right. So one way of looking at it is physical memory is main memory or RAM, and virtual memory may be your disk. Right. So here what we are saying is it's the main memory is the real one, the RAM one, and the other one is the virtual. Okay. So now what we are saying is virtual memory is a technique that allows the execution of processes that are not completely in memory. So scenario 1 is when you want to execute a process, you bring the process in its entirety, you bring the whole process into physical memory from the virtual memory, whole process. And scenario 2 is when you want to execute a process, you only bring a part of the process into memory, not the whole one. Okay. So at once you can see the advantage of scenario 2, because you are bringing only a part of the process. So which means now you will have the ability to bring in a larger number of processes into the main memory, versus the case in which you bring entire processes in. There you will have a limit on how many processes you can bring into memory. So more processes you can bring into memory, higher is your degree of multi-programming. So what we are saying is it is okay to bring a part of a process into the physical memory for execution. Okay, so this is the general idea. Advantage of virtual memory: size of physical memory no longer a limiting factor in writing programs. So if I am a programmer and if virtual memory was not there, then I would already have this thing on the back of the mind that this is the size of the physical memory, and my program has to be written accordingly. My program should not access more memory than the amount of physical memory I have, right? The whole thing will be brought into physical memory, and if I need more, then there's no way that my program can run, right? But with virtual memory now, I can create a program which is not bounded by the amount of physical memory that I have. Okay, so if I say that fine, I've got 4 GB of memory, and out of that 4 GB, 1.5 GB is taken up by the OS. So what I have available is 2.5 GB of user memory, and then let's say out of that, the amount that is available to me is on an average is, let's say, half a GB, 512 MB. So let's just assume. So now with that, if I have at my disposal 512 MB of main memory, my application, my program can definitely have a larger requirement than that. It can have a requirement of 1 GB or 2 GB also. This is okay because anyway now I am allowed to bring part of a process. If I was not allowed to bring a part of a process, if I had to bring the whole process, and my program size or my memory requirements were 2 or 3 GB, would have been difficult and even impossible. But now that I can bring a part of a process in memory, now that memory restriction is gone in my head, and now I can even create programs which have larger physical memory footprints. Okay, so size of physical memory is no longer a limiting factor in writing programs, and you can see that is what is actually happening now with all this AI things and animations and all that. The memory footprints are huge. So if you have a requirement that the whole process has to be brought in, you're going to have a tough time executing programs. So we can write programs that are larger than physical memory, right? And find main memory is abstracted into large array of storage. Okay, so I think probably virtual memory is abstracted into a large array of storage. So now the main thing we carry away from here is now we relax the requirement that the whole process has to be brought into main memory for execution. We say it's okay for part of a process to be brought into memory for execution. So the advantage of this, as we discussed, is now more processes can be brought into the physical memory. Okay, and we have a higher degree of multi-programming. So now your engineers, of course, nothing comes for free. So if we have come up with this new technique of bringing parts of processes in, now this will have some overhead, some cost as well. It will make our memory management more complex, right? Because now we have to keep track of. So now the question comes when we say, we're bringing a part of the process into memory. Now naturally, what will be the next question? The next question will be which part of the process we're bringing, right? So in this chapter we are going to be looking at the cost and complexity of virtual memory. We'll be discussing that throughout this chapter. Okay, now I am on slide number 5, right? Titled Introduction. So now the question is, will this technique of bringing parts of a process into memory to execute those parts, will this trick work? Right? Is this trick going to work? So, scientists, they did a lot of simulations, a lot of experiments, and they had some observations based on that. So these are some of the observations. First observation is programs often have code to handle unusual error conditions. Okay, so programs often have code to handle unusual error conditions. So since these errors seldom occur, if ever, this code is almost never executed. So for a particular program, there can be certain error conditions. So if this error occurs, then execute this code. If this error occurs, execute this code, right? So keep track of the instruction that caused the error, and then give a suitable message to the user. Dump the memory into some place, into a log file, so that the user can see which condition caused the problem, right? So these so all this error handling codes. So if these errors rarely occur, then this code will also rarely run. Okay, so that's one observation. Other is, a lot of times we're allocating data structures like arrays, and what we say is arrays are often allocated more memory than they actually need. Right, so we have observed that. Third observation is, certain options or code of a program may be used very rarely. Okay, so certain parts of your code, they may be used quite rarely. So if you're using Word or Excel or PowerPoint, perhaps you use some of the features, and a lot of the features, since you've been using the program, perhaps you've never even used at all, or you may not even be aware of those features. Right. So, what we're trying to get at is, there are many parts of the code which may not be executed, or which may be very rarely executed. Okay. So bringing them in, bringing parts of the code which are never executed or which are rarely executed may not be a smart thing. Because you're bringing them into memory, physical memory, because you're bringing the whole process into physical memory, and with that, other processes that need to be in physical memory, they are not. And the process that you're bringing in, if 40% of that code is not even executed or accessed, then clearly you have a problem. Okay. What you can do, what you can rather do is only bring the part of the process which for which code is being executed. Okay. Even if the other point is, even if the entire program is needed, it may not all be needed at the same time, right? So perhaps as you're typing, so you need that I/O part, the keyboard part. You're doing a word count, so like that you may need some parts, but the other parts you may not need at all. Perhaps the printing part you will do only once you've written the paper. Right. So even if you need the entire program, you may not need all the code for that program at the same time. Okay. So all these observations point us to the fact that it is okay to execute a process partially in memory, or bring only a part of the process into memory, versus bringing the whole process. Okay. So we need the ability to execute a program that is only partially in memory. Benefits of doing this: so program is no longer constrained by the amount of physical memory, right? So I may have a program with a requirement even greater than the physical memory, but now because I have this condition that I can bring only a part of it, my program will work. If this condition is not there, and if my memory requirements are more than the physical memory, then I cannot bring that process in. Okay. So programs are no longer constrained by amount of physical memory. They can have larger memory footprints than the amount of physical memory available. Okay. Each program takes up a lesser amount of physical memory, so more programs can be run at the same time. Degree of multi-programming, throughput, utilization go up. Right. So now that we are bringing parts of a process, so which definitely means now we can support a larger number of processes in physical memory, which means our degree of multi-programming will definitely go up. Right. Okay. So that way it will be a good thing. Okay. Throughput will go up, per unit time will be making more progress per process. CPU utilization could also go up, because with a small number of processes you may just so encounter the case that the CPU and IO are not overlapped with a small number of processes. So like we had the question in the quiz, if you have two processes, will multi-programming work? Well, there's a good chance it may not work in the real world, although it may work theoretically, because the interleaving, the overlap of CPU and IO may not be proper. So which means, let's say both processes become ready to do IO at the same time. So naturally your utilization is close to zero. So but with a larger number of processes in your system, the likelihood of this happening is much lower. Okay, so if a set of processes are doing IO at the same time, you'll have a higher probability of finding some processes which are ready to do CPU. So this is because you have more processes in the main memory. Okay, so which means your utilization can go up. Okay, less IO needed to load or swap programs into memory. So each user program would run faster. So when you're bringing complete processes in, you're doing a disk IO, and if you're bringing the whole process in, then you're bringing in more data. So that disk transfer time will obviously be more. But now if you're bringing parts of a process, then your disk IO time will reduce. Okay. So that disk delay will be less, and ultimately the user program would make would be running faster because it has to wait. The wait time for the disk IO is reduced, so it can start executing instructions quicker. Okay, so these are all the advantages of bringing parts of a process into physical memory for execution. So now I am on slide 6, and we quickly do a recap of what we have been talking about in the previous slides. So virtual memory, separation of user logical memory from physical memory, right? So by implementing virtual memory now, the constraint of limited memory is not in the minds of the programmers much. They can create programs with large memory footprints because now anyway parts of the program are brought into memory as required. Okay, so at one end you have the real memory, which is the physical memory which you need for execution. On the other hand, you have the virtual memory or the logical memory. Okay, only part of a program needs to be in physical memory for execution. Logical address space can be much larger than physical address space. Of course it is. Hard disk can be 1 terabyte. Physical memory can be 4 gigabytes. So you can see the fraction, right? The difference, the scale of the difference in capacities, right? Allows physical address space to be shared by more processes, right? More programs running concurrently, less IO needed to load or swap processes. So these are all the advantages of virtual memory. And finally we see that virtual memory can be implemented via demand paging. So now we will discuss demand paging, which is a means to implement virtual memory. Okay. Okay, so here we are on slide 7, and we see a picture over here which is trying to show us that, which is trying to compare the sizes of virtual memory and physical memory. And in general what we see is that virtual memory is much larger than physical memory, right? So on the left we see a virtual memory with a number of pages. How many pages we can have depends on two factors, which are number one, the capacity of the virtual memory, and number two, the page size. So capacity divided by page size is virtual memory. So if your phone is 256 GB, right? So that's generally your virtual memory capacity, and your page size is 4K, then 256 GB divided by 4K, those many pages you will have. Okay. So on the left we see the virtual memory, all the pages going from 0 to V, right? So we have V plus 1 pages, and on the other side we have our physical memory, right? And then we have a memory map. So memory map is just nothing but our page table, right? So that is nothing but page table. Okay. So the virtual address space of a process refers to the virtual view of how a process is stored in memory. Okay. So a certain virtual address 0, and exists in contiguous memory going all the way from 0 to V. Okay. And for physical memory we divide it into frames. So same way, size of the physical memory, let's say 4 GB divided by the frame size. So page size and frame size, they are exactly the same. Okay. And of course we know that the page frames assigned to a process may not be contiguous. So we don't have a contiguous memory allocation. So we may have a couple of pages assigned in one particular block, and we may have a couple of pages assigned to another block. So the frames, so each of the pages of a process, each page needs a frame, and the frames which are allocated to pages, they do not have to be contiguous, right? So we discussed that in the previous chapter, right? So essentially we have our memory map or our page table, and then for each page it maps it to a physical frame. So we generate the logical address, we look up the page table, get the physical address, right? So now we can once we're at that physical address, we either execute the instruction or pull out data and so on. And we also see a disk over here. So what that means is, for some of these accesses we may need a disk operation. Okay, so what we're saying is, for a particular page, if that page does not exist in main memory, so which means for that page there is no mapping to a physical frame. So in that case, now we have to bring that page from disk to main memory. Okay, so which means we have to create an entry for it in the page table. We have to map it to an appropriate frame, and now we are good to go. Okay. Likewise, we can have a communication in the other way also. Page frame, page being evicted from main memory to disk. So which means that page will have an entry in the page table. We null that entry, and then we copy that page back to the disk. Okay. So this is what we're doing. How we'll shed more light on all of these in the coming slides. Okay, so now we are on slide 8, and this slide is titled demand paging. Okay. So as the name gives a very good idea of what this technique is. In this technique, pages are loaded on demand, which means if there's a requirement for a page, if a page is accessed, only then it is loaded into main memory. Okay, because we know that any part of a process, if we have to execute that, it has to be it has to be within main memory, right? So what happens is that that particular process, it has some pages, and they're all in the virtual memory. Now, but if we want to execute a particular page of a process, we have to bring it into physical memory. So let's say the page contains some instruction, for example. So then what we do is we have to bring that page into main memory. So what exactly do we do in that? How do we bring a page into main memory? Well, we first have to find an appropriate frame for it. Once we find a frame, that frame will have a physical address, right? and then we will load the contents of that page. We'll copy the contents of that page into the appropriate frame. So note that both page and frame are of same size. So we may have at virtual address 1000. For that physical address, let's say we have is 500, right? And so we load the contents of that page into that particular frame. We create an entry in the page table saying that for this virtual address, this is the physical address, right? And now the page is loaded into memory and the entry is there in the page table. So this is how we bring pages into main memory. So what we are saying is it may not be necessary to load an entire process into memory before execution. We may not initially need the entire process in memory. For example, a program that accepts user options and accordingly executes certain code. So not wise to load all the code for all the options, as initially only one option is selected, right? So the strategy is now for demand paging is load pages only as they are needed during program execution. Okay. Load pages only as they are needed in program execution. So in the beginning, don't load any page. Now when the process starts running, you will have access to pages. Okay, now for this process I want page 0, then I want page 1, then I want page 2. So page by page you will require an access. Now whenever you need an access to a page, only then you bring it into the main memory. So the idea is pages that are not needed are never loaded into memory. So this is called demand paging and used in virtual memory systems. Okay. So the picture in the next slide illustrates this technique. We'll just look at that. We need some form of hardware support for this demand paging. We need to distinguish which pages are in memory and which are not in memory, which are in the disk. So we can associate a valid invalid bit with each page. Valid page is in memory, invalid page is in disk. So now what we are saying is only bring a page in memory when it is accessed, otherwise don't. So which means at any point of time, if a process is running, then some pages will be in memory, some will not be in memory. So the ones which are in memory, they will have their valid bit set, and the pages which are not in memory, their valid bit can be 0. Okay. Okay, now I am on slide number 9, and now what do we see here? Right. So here we see, for a particular process, some of the pages are in main memory and some are not. The pages of a process which are in main memory, they will have, an entry in the page table. The ones which are not in memory will not have an entry in the page table. So we see that we have the logical memory, right? And we have all of these pages in there. How many pages do we have? We have 8 pages, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. So permanently they live where? They live in the disk. So we see a disk with all the 8 pages which permanently live there. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. Right? How many pages? 8. So all of them have a number starting with A and then going, so 0 for A, 1 for B, 2 for C, 3 for D and so on. And finally 7 for H. So that is our logical memory as for this particular process. Okay. So like this, each process will have its logical or virtual address space. Now among these 8 pages, how many are in main memory? Well, only 3. Which are they? Which are those pages for this process which are in memory? A, C and F. Okay. So when we say the page is in memory, which means the contents of the page have been loaded into the respective physical frames, which means these are good to go for execution, because we know the whichever page we want to execute. So now we're talking about execution at the page level. Whichever page for a process we want to execute, that page has to be brought into the physical memory before we can start the execution. So we have 3 pages in memory which have found respective frames, right? So page 0 has found frame 4, page 2 has found frame 6, page 5 has found frame 9. So that is exactly what the page table says. So to keep the simplicity, we're just talking about the page and frame numbers and not addresses. So for frame 0 mapping is to, for page 0 mapping is to frame 4, for page 2 mapping is to frame 6, for page 5 mapping is to frame 9. So for these 3 pages, the valid and invalid bit is, we are using that. So we can have 1 bit, and if the page is valid, we can set it as 1 in that entry in the page table. If the page is invalid, we can get a value for that as 0. So each page table entry has 1 bit, which is a valid and invalid bit. So what we are saying is, part of in the page table, what does each entry contain? We'll soon see it in more detail. Each entry contains in the page table contains the base physical address and then plus values for some bits. So one of these which convey information which is needed in the memory management implementation. So one such piece of information is this valid and invalid bit. So for 3 pages the valid bit is set, otherwise invalid. Okay, so what we are saying is here we are showing a process that is partially in memory. 3 out of 8 pages are in memory. So the way we do that is we already discussed. To bring a page into memory, we have to find a frame for it. We have to load it into that frame, and then we have to change the page table entry. Okay. So for frame 0, the base address of, for page 0, the base address of frame 4 has to come. Okay, so I hope this is clear, right? So here we are seeing more information about the valid invalid bit. So this is slide 10, title valid and invalid bit. Right. So what we are saying is, for each page table, what does the entry contain? So we are saying the one piece of information it contains is a frame number, right? Or we can say the F part of the physical address, starting physical address of that frame, right? To be more precise, but we can, for simplicity, we can also say frame number. So for each page table, the entry contains frame number and part, and one of the other things it contains is a valid invalid bit. So with each page table entry, a valid invalid bit is associated. Value of V means page is in memory, memory resident. Value of I means page is not in memory. So of course we're using demand paging. So now initially, when a process just starts executing, what are the values for this valid invalid bit? Obviously it's set as I for all the entries of that page table for that particular process, because in demand paging, initially how many pages are brought in? 0. It's demand paging, so only when we have a requirement for a page, only when we are accessing a page do we bring that into memory, otherwise we don't. Okay, so we are seeing frame numbers and valid invalid set values for a particular page table which is belonging to a particular process. Now what we say is, during address translation, if a valid invalid bit in page table entry is I, which means we have a page fault. So what we are saying is, the way it will work is, when think about what will happen when a process starts to run, right? Or when a process is actually running. So during the execution of a particular process. So during the execution, some of the pages will be in memory, right, because they've been executed, and some will not be in memory. So the pages that are in memory, for them valid bit is set, value is V for the valid invalid bit. For pages of that process not in memory, valid invalid value is I. So we can have this using only one bit, 1 and 0. 1 means pages in memory, 0 means pages on disk. So now, when you're accessing page by page, right, what you do is you check the valid invalid bit for that page. If the answer is V, that page is in memory, go ahead, go to the page table, get the physical address, execute. If the valid invalid bit is I, it means the page is not in memory. So then what do we have to do? We have to execute that. Whatever is in that page, we have to execute it. Page is not in memory, so what do? We have to bring the page into memory from the disk. So this, this event in which the page which we need is not in memory, this event is called a page fault. So we go to a particular page in a process, virtual page. For that page, we look up the page table entry, and we see that the value is invalid, which means the page has not been loaded into main memory, right? So this event is called a page fault, and obviously what we have to do in the event of a page fault is we have to bring that page in. Okay. So this is what we call page fault. Trying to access a page for which trying to access a page which is not which has not been loaded into an appropriate physical frame. So therefore its valid invalid bit value is I. Okay, so that's a page fault. Okay, now I am on slide 11. And now we spend some time talking about this page fault. Okay. So now the issue here is because we are doing demand paging, so pages are brought in as desired. Right. So we are bringing parts of a process in. Initially, we are not bringing any pages in. So we have what we call these page faults, which means that we need to have, we access one page and then we find that. So why are we accessing that page? Obviously in order to run it. So ideally for that page, it should be mapped to a physical frame. The page would have been loaded into that frame, and now we can go to that physical address after looking in the page table, and we can execute that. But in the case of page fault, what happens is that mapping is not done. The entry is not there in the page table for that particular page. A suitable frame has not been found for that particular page, and that page has not been loaded into a particular frame. So this is called a page fault. So what happens if the process tries to access a page that was not brought into main memory? Access to a page marked as invalid causes a page fault. So essentially the OS is trapped. It's a trap to the OS, an interrupt. And paging hardware, in translating the address, notices that the page is not in the memory and generates a trap interrupt to the OS. Now obviously there's only one thing left to do. You do need access to that page. You do need to execute whatever's in that page. So which means that you have to bring the page into main memory. Okay. So now the page needs to be brought into main memory. So that, whatever actions you are taking in order to bring that page into main memory, those what you're doing there is you're handling the page fault. Right. So how do we do that? How do we handle the page fault? First we check whether the page reference was valid, that is in the process address space. Right. So we are we're referring to a page. First we have to check whether that page lies within the process's address space. Because what you have is you have a bunch of processes in the virtual address space, a bunch of them, and you can refer to a page in any one of those processes. Right. So whenever you have a page reference for within which says it's a page reference for a process X, you have to first see whether that page lies within that the virtual address space for process X or not. So we can do that using our base and limit registers, right? We discussed in the last chapter. So it has to be within that range. If it is, then it's valid. So if the reference for the page is valid, we need to bring the page from disk to memory. So first job is to find a free frame. So we have a free frame list. Perhaps it could be something like a linked list of available frames, right? Along with frame number and their starting address and frame size and so on, right? So we need to find a free frame. We take one from the free frame list data structure. So now that we found a frame, we schedule a disk operation to read the desired page into the newly allocated frame. So we have to copy the page into that frame that we just selected in step 3. Okay. When the disk operation is complete, which means now the page has been loaded into the frame, right? So this would depend on how much data we have, which is our page or frame size, and what our disk IO bandwidth is. Okay. So we'll look at those numericals soon. So when the disk operation is complete, the page is loaded to the frame. We modify the page table to indicate that the page is now in memory. Okay, so obviously we need modification to the page table. We declare the valid invalid bit as valid, which means we can set it at 1 now, and we also modify the page table entry for that page, right, to show that this particular page maps to this particular frame. So which means the P part of the virtual address corresponds to the F part of the physical address. Okay, so maybe to be simple, saying that page 10 maps to frame 50. Just an example. Okay. Now we restart the instruction that caused the page fault. So some instruction would have been executed that would have led to the access of a page that would have caused a page fault. Now we have done all that. Page is in memory, page table populated accordingly. Now we restart that instruction, and now the instruction will work properly because that page has been loaded into physical memory now. So now the process, we restart that instruction which caused the page fault. The process can now access the page as if it was always in memory. Okay. So initially we start the process with no pages in memory, and then as we keep accessing a page, we bring it into memory. Okay. So this is how we handle a page fault. So now I am on slide 12, last slide for today, and here we are showing in the form of a picture whatever we discussed in the last slide, which was slide 11. So these are the sequence of events going from 1 to 6 which are involved or which occur whenever we have a page fault. Okay. So what happens is we have an instruction to load M, let's say, and execute. So that instruction corresponds to a page. Okay, so if a page size is 4K, how much does an instruction take? Not 4K. So let's say the instruction is a part of a page. The instruction is load M. So naturally, when we want to run this instruction, naturally for the page in which this instruction is, for that particular process, that has to be mapped to a specific physical frame, and the mapping will be there where in the page table. Okay. So what we have is in the virtual address space, for each process we have a virtual address space which has a number of virtual pages, and within each page we can have instructions and data. So this is one such example, load M. So the page, the corresponding page, we check in the page table and we see the valid invalid bit set as I. So if it's 1 bit, we see the value is 0, which means this particular page has not been loaded into main memory. So with the value of I, we come to this conclusion. So now the paging hardware traps to the OS, interrupts the OS, and what the OS does is grabs the page from disk. Right. So disk is where the permanent copy of the page lives. Okay. So page is in the backing store, which is a disk. So what we do is now we schedule a disk I/O. We bring in the page from the disk, and we find a free frame for this page, free physical frame. So we have a list of free frames. We can allocate one from there. And once we have found a free frame, we bring in the missing page into the free frame. So note the size of a page and a frame are the same. So whatever we had in this, whatever code or data we had in this particular frame, which contains a load M, we bring all of the, whatever data and instructions we had in this particular page, which contains load M, we bring all of that into an appropriate frame. So now we we go back to the page table and we change the valid invalid bit to V, and we set the frame number or the starting address of the frame number, the F part of the physical address. Now we restart the instruction, and now we'll see that the valid invalid bit is set as V or 1, and now the page is in memory, and now using the page table we know the physical address of that, and we go ahead and execute this load M instruction. So this is how we handle a page fault. So I hope it is clear. Okay.